Hi, Mike Amundsen here talking to you about designing and building great web APIs. And in this series of screencasts, I'm focusing on the DARRT library that I use in my Node projects to build and explore the API space. So we'll just review this really quickly. This is what the DARRT section of my Node project looks like. Data, actions, representations, resources, and transitions, each one doing a special job. The data one is the one I want to focus on in this screencast, and that's actually the thing that defines the data types and the data interface rules. So we'll just take a little look at the interface first. Localhost 8181 list. Right now we've got nothing in our set of records. So let's look at the definition. So definition is pretty easy. It's all declarative. What properties are in the interface, which of those properties are required, are any of them enumerated types, and are there default values for them? Now you can see everything starts out with ID, date created, and date updated. And that's actually enough to create a record in the system. So if I go back here and I actually change this over, X post, and I do what I call a naked post. So a naked post doesn't have any data with it. Naked post actually works. It creates a new record in the system with an ID and the date created and date time. Now, that's not really too helpful. What if I want to do something like add a name to the system? I actually want to use name. So actually, I just literally put in name here. So now I've declared a new property in the interface. Now, you'll notice here I'm not doing anything about strong typing or anything like that. As we've mentioned in other screencasts, that's handled in the transition section, and it can be enforced in other places. But right now, we're just defining the properties themselves. This is a nice loosely coupled, loosely defined property set. So now I can actually do a little better on my post. And in fact, I was cheating a little bit. I can actually supply my own ID names as well. So I can say name is Mike, and ID is set to XXX. So now when I create that post, I get a new record in the system that actually has the ID, and it's set to Mike. So we can just clear this out a little bit. So that's pretty good. Let's try something else. Let's create a status field, and let's make that status an enumerated type. So status has the possible values of pending, active, and completed. Right? So that's actually the enumerated record. So now I have a couple of possibilities. So now when I create a new record, I can actually say status equals, now let's say I want to say status equals Fred, right? So it's outside the scope. So what I'll get back is an invalid enumerator for the status, right? So I'll go back to saying, let's see, didn't I already create this record here? So let's make this a new one, status equals pending, right? So now status equals pending, creates a new record with the name, the ID, and the status is pending. Now, I'll do a lot of records with status. So maybe I don't want to actually have to supply that all the time. I want to make it more like the ID we were talking about earlier. So let's create a default for status and set that default value to pending. All right. That's pretty straightforward. So now I've got a default record in the system. So now when I create a new record, I'm not going to have to include status. We'll make this for Mindy, by the way. And we'll set this to queues. So now what happens when I save this record in the system? I'll automatically get the status of pending. So that's actually pretty handy. So there's a lot of things that I can do inside this system. Now, by the way, you might be asking what happens if I try to post this again. It's literally going to tell me that the record already exists. So this is a pretty good way to manage data. I define the properties. I can decide whether or not one is created. For instance, I could have actually said, by the way, that name was created. so that the next time anybody tries to save a record to the system, it will have to have a name property in it. I can define enumerated types, and I can even set the defaults for enumerated types. That's a pretty powerful way to start out by creating an interface. Now, in other screencasts, we'll talk about how we can start to use the actions and other parts of the representations and resources and transitions in order to shore up this interface and fill out all the other elements. But hopefully that starts to make sense and give you some ideas on how you can design and build great web APIs. Check the bug at the top for more in this series, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.